Set to this matter now, the matter of finding a strategic equity partner for South African Airways has remained in the news for 2 years now. This, of course, as new developments are beginning to come up there, including a protected disclosure complaint that was made to Speaker of National Assembly, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, by the suspended DG at Public Enterprises, Mr. Tlhakudi. Public Enterprise Minister Pravin Gordhan has hit back at allegations made by the suspended Department Director General and has reportedly made explosive claims about the proposed SA Airways takeover by Takatso Consortium. He says he's being targeted by Minister Gordhan. It must be noted that Newzroom Afrika has reached out to the Ministry of Public Enterprises for right of reply. The former DG, Mr. Tlhakudi, is joining us, and they, of course, have promised to come back to us to make sense of all this matter. Mr. Tlhakudi, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, Mr. Mdluli, and good evening to the viewers, and thank you for having me on the show.
It was with reluctance we saw in the National Assembly, especially from the ANC members of Parliament, but eventually there's this agreement that yourself as well as the Minister would need to come before that Parliament and really discuss this fallout between the two of you. Because from where we sit, you could be raising legitimate issues around the undervaluing of South African Airways. That's one story. The other story, you could be a disgruntled employee who's facing disciplinary action. Both these issues need to be addressed and need to be attended to in some way or the other. Let's start with the latter. It appears that you're saying this is the thing that broke this thing and got this thing started. The fact that you were raising these issues and then you were then hurled into a disciplinary. They said there was a whistleblower complaint against you on allegations of you interfering with the appointment of a security manager. Tell me what exactly happened in this appointment of the security manager.
And let me first start by saying that on the issues of SAA belong in Parliament with the Portfolio Committee. They have a responsibility to ensure that proper oversight is done there and the deal is investigated to ensure that South Africans are not being shortchanged. And that's not a matter, my industrial relations matter or my disciplinary does not belong the Parliament, but of course it will come up and I will deal with it. Now, the disciplinary hearing is continuing. It has been continuing since August last year. The lawyers of the minister have been presenting their case. They finished last week Friday. They took 8 months to present their case. They presented a whole lot of witnesses, of course. And we're due to start on Friday, but we never got started because the chairperson interfered with my evidence. Obviously, I was presenting evidence on my own behalf. And let me further say that my employment is due to come to an end July this year. I had a 3-year contract. It's ending in July. So whatever happens, whether I win or lose the case, I will no longer be a public servant by the end of July. So this is not about the job. And coming back to your question, my apology for taking a little bit long to get to it. This is about whistleblowing. That's how I put it. It is said that because I had asked a panel that was interviewed for the security position to interview another candidate that I had interviewed with another panel for another position, but we had basically the same qualifications as what the other position, the security position required, that I asked them to interview, that was interference. Yeah. And I should say that candidate that I had referred to the security panel was preferred. HR prepared a memo. It was brought to me on the 1st of February last year. I decided not to fill the position, so I did not approve the appointment.
So, I mean, in simple terms, one of the questions that will be asked, did you overrule a panel recommendation? Did the panel recommend somebody else and you overruled them?
I asked the panel to interview this particular candidate, and HR brought me a memo where this person was interviewed. That's exactly what happened. What happened in the panel, I don't know. My engagements were with HR.
Were you at that point already at loggerheads, so to speak, or at least in some kind of tension with the minister? It does seem others are saying already at that point you were feeling like you are being locked outside of some key decisions that were happening in the department.
Well, we had our differences, but I did not think that they were of such magnitude that it would cause what has happened up to now. I had been removed from leading the SAA transaction. It did not make sense, especially when you assign an advisor and a junior manager to lead negotiations with Takatso. The ministerial handbook is very clear on the role of advisors. They should not be involved in operational issues. I believe that the junior manager was not properly equipped to lead such discussions. The DP aviation team was not part of that team that was doing the negotiations. The head of the aviation team had been removed before myself. So I really believe that we are ill-equipped, but well, it was the minister's prerogative. Ultimately, the SOEs, they report to him as the minister, as the shoulder minister.
So this is the story. I mean, we got to a point, I think it was around 2016, 2017, that generally as a country there was a feeling that SAA is bankrupt. I think it was working at huge losses at the time. And we were either going to liquidate this state-owned entity or restructure it. Did you agree with that process? That those were our options?
Now, I recall the discussion I had with some board members or former board members of SAA. I think it was on the 5th of December 2019. And they were quite adamant that the business needs to be put business rescue. And of course, the question that I was asked is, did you understand the implications of that? You lose, obviously, the control of that particular business when the business rescue practitioners come in. There was a clear path to recapitalize the business between that time and the end of that financial year, which would have been at 30 March 2020. And, I felt that it was a drastic decision. Unfortunately, I was not part of a board meeting that happened that evening. Though I was the acting DG at the time, the minister went with DDG Makobe into that meeting, and it was decided that the business must be put into business rescue. I think, as history has so far has told us that it's turned out to be quite an expensive option that was taken.
Did you raise an objection, though? I mean, you're the DG, you're being left out of this rather as an important meeting.
Yeah. Well, I was the acting DG, and I came in during the day, thinking the meeting was happening during the day. It happened at night. So I left, and only to find out the meeting had happened in my absence. But anyway, that was not an important issue at the time. The minister and the board had made a decision. Obviously, we had to try and make the best out of it, yeah.
So we are led to believe by Advocate Makobe in some of the interviews that he's done and I've listened to that you were part of this process every step of the way, including the process of identifying a strategic equity partner that is going to come on and take a majority stake in South African Airways. And in all these processes, yes, there was debate about how this transaction is going to be structured, but coming out of those debates, as a collective, you always agreed on what direction you were going to take.
Yeah, I felt for Mr. Makobe, this morning when I saw the interview. I think he had, it's rather unfortunate that the minister chose to put someone who's basically my subordinate in the department to come and speak about this particular matter. Someone that really had not been that close to this proceeding, to the negotiations. But be that as it may, let me say that my involvement ended in January 2021 when, in terms of leading the process, and that was the process that we did with RMB as a transaction advisor, where we identified, where they identified two potential SCPs, and the department had engagements with two African airlines, as well as a European consulting group linked to to a European airline, which had partnered with a funder out of Luxembourg. Yeah. So we had 5 shortlisted entities that we gave on to the board to continue with the process. Yeah.
So let's stop right there a little bit and tease that one out a little bit. The transaction, the transaction advisor and the 2 that were given to you. Yeah. Did their report say they found no strategic partner suitable for South African Airways?
No, it didn't. And that's what Mr. Makobe said this morning. It didn't. It said to the department, here are the 2 SCP candidates that we believe you should pay a little bit more attention to. And the SCP RMB, by the way, at that time, had decided to pull out of the process. And this was basically a closing report to us to say, this is where we have arrived at this moment.
Yeah. Why did they decide to pull out? Because we are led to believe that their engagement ended there. It was almost if it's an amicable thing, and they wrote their closing report and said, okay, our contract ends here, our business is done. There you go. This is what we found out.
No, they pulled out. I mean, I had a meeting with the team from RMB, and one of the points that they were raising was the process was taking a little bit long, and that took obviously their weight. But they also said, don't bother paying us, so we didn't get any cost there. So, I mean, just on that, it looks like in a hurry to leave, so to speak. But anyway, they gave us a report and recommended those 2 entities. And we handed that over to the board. I had Mr. Makobe speak about a technical committee.
Yes, I was coming there. So and this is where the discrepancy comes, because you say there are 5, but if we look at what he's saying then a technical committee comes in and it recommended 4. And part of that technical committee were external parties outside of the Department of Public Enterprises. Who was in that technical committee?
No, I would like to know that, because I was still in the department at that time. And this to me is just fiction. There's nothing like that. There was no technical committee. There was no extra 4 bids that were received later on that were compared to Takatso. Now, I mean, it will be helpful if Mr. Makobe were to just share, the report that came out of that technical committee, and how it was whittled down. What was the value system to arrive at Takatso? There's nothing like that, and that I don't know why he felt he needed to say that, but the truth is that Takatso was a product of what of the minister's process, which I cannot comment much on because I don't know. They merged, and Mr. Gideon Novik of Lyft wrote an article in the Sunday Times, the Business Times, I think sometime last year, may have been in November, where he said he was approached by the minister. So Mr. Makobe will have to reconcile the story that he came up this morning with what, amongst others, Mr. Novich has said. And I should also say, with regard to the process that I ran, there was also an article written by Ms. Carol Peter, I think it was for News 24, where she really detailed how the process ran. So this, I'm sure she would have been privy to Mr. Makobe's process if it existed, and she would have written about it. But I can categorically say that Mr. Makobe telling South Africans the truth.
So as far as you know then, how did we get to the 5? Was it all part of the transaction advisor process?
Now, the transaction advisor came up with 2.
With 2. So how did we get to the 3?
Yeah, the other 3 were a product of, for instance, one of the African airlines, in fact, 2 of the African airlines wrote to us, to the department. In fact, one of these airlines had their minister sent here as an envoy to meet with our president and to say, can we look at how the 2 airlines can work together.
Is this the Ethiopian airline, part of the airlines that you're talking about?
Yeah, and Ethiopia also was in the mix, and one of the financial services companies here in the country, forwarded the letter to us through them. So we felt they needed to be put into the pot to the board, because remember there was no board before December 2020.
Yeah.
So the department had handled the process because of the absence of the board, and the BR practitioners who were obviously running the business felt this was not their mandate. They would not want to deal with the issue of the SEP.
Yeah.
Now, when the board was appointed in December 2020, headed by Mr. Geoffrey Trainer, literally the work of the department came to its logical end, and it coincided very nicely with the report that we received from RMB. Yeah. And it was for that reason that, as the DG, I did the presentation to the board with the minister in the meeting, and we handed over this work to the board. So that's what should have happened. But of course, the board members of that particular time will tell you they never got to do the work that we thought they were the best position to do, because the minister emerged with Takatso, with Harith and Global.
So let's talk about Harith and Global then. You saying they were frantic, sending you SMSs in the middle of the night to say, no, you need to consider this particular consortium. Who was sending you messages?
I didn't necessarily say middle of the night. I said I was bombarded by calls.
Yes.
By calls.
You were at home, were you at home? But you were not. You were otherwise disposed when you were getting these messages.
Yeah. Well, it was. We're still in the last stages of COVID, so I was obviously mostly working at home, and it was also on weekends. I remember. So from the calls from the minister, calls from Peter Novick, including text messages, basically saying that I need to look at this. And for me, it did not make sense, because we have run a process, we have handed over to the board. Now, how do we justify bringing in this new consortium into the mix?
And did you present this? I mean, you took your matter, for example, to be reinstated to the Labour Court, and this is part of the issues that you raised. Did you present this evidence to say, look, I got these WhatsApp messages, the minister was in communication with me, he's the one who raised this issue?
Yeah, I think the information has been in the papers, but going to court, for instance, the first time we went to court, it was around the illegality of my suspension. The suspension should be 6 months, and I've been at home now for 12 months, and been suspended, I think, from June, so it will be about 11 months. And that was both times we were at court, by the way. The court did not deal with the merits, though the judge in the first matter agreed that my suspension was illegal. But our matters were rejected on the basis of agency. They said we did not agency. So I've heard that the minister and the department have been making quite a mountain out of that. The board did not apply itself to the matter of SAA. And of course, we had presented that evidence to try and show that I've been suspended for really what is a non-issue. The real issue is what transpired with the SAA transaction.
With our suspended Public Enterprises Director General Kgathatso Tlhakudi says he's on his way out anyway. By July, his contract will be done. So either way, he'll no longer be a public servant, but wants to raise these issues nonetheless. I'll take you back. You spoke to my colleague, Colin Gambi, at the announcement of the consortium. And when you were asked about these folks, your words, you said, we are pleased with what we found. They are a reputable entity in that consortium. What has changed?
Yeah, well, I was not part of the announcement. I'm not sure I had that discussion.
You were live on air with Colin Gambi here on Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405. When you said these words, we are pleased with what we found. They are a reputable entity in that consortium.
Yeah. Well, look, obviously, I'm a master's voice, if I may put it that way. What I expressed at the time must have been obviously a product of what the minister had wanted. If anything, I wish I could pull those words if you're saying I have made them, but I don't recall them.
Did you feel you couldn't bring South Africans into confidence as somebody who is the accounting officer there? Because ultimately the buck would have stopped with you, right? Because politicians have this tendency to say, I'm not involved in any of these operations. Tlhakudi is the accounting officer. He's the one who must account.
Yeah, well, Tlhakudi, did not, as I said, I was not part of the announcement. It must have been an interview that happened.
Yes, it was an interview that happens later. Yeah, that happened later.
That happened later on. And of course, there were a number of milestones after that. There was a signing of an MOU between the department and Takatso. I did not sign that. There was a share sale and purchase agreement that I did not sign, which actually when I came back to the office in both instances, there was an acting DG. I raised, concern with the share purchase agreement. It was signed in February. It was already saying that in March, we need to give 900 million rands cash, put it into an escrow account that will be controlled by Takatso. And of course, the acting DG was Sani Makobe, who was there as the DDG Legal Services. I raised concern. I said, we don't have 900 million rands for starters. And the PFMA is very clear that you don't commit the state if you don't know where the resources are coming from. And I put it to them, I said, colleagues, it is not only I as the academic officer who is responsible for the proper financial management in the department. The PFMA speaks to the acting DG, it speaks to the other officials. And what I'm presented here is a failure on both your sides to guide the minister, because ultimately we are the custodians of finances. The accounting officer ultimately is, of course. So those issues are raised, and this would have been obviously during the course of February.
Was it agreed at any point that the structure of the deal will be a preference share system?
Well, that preference share scheme, my dear sir, it's how can I call it? It's a scam. I don't have another proper English word to use. It is said that the state will be paid 3 billion rand, which is equivalent to the the assets value as per Takatso's valuation.
Yeah.
And it is said that this will be paid over time as dividends get declared. SA has never paid dividends. And if I'm the controlling shareholder of the business, why would I pay these dividends? Obviously, my primary motive will be to ensure that the money is kept in the business. So we can have a situation where the state never gets any dividend, the 3 billion never gets paid. And that's one of the issues that I had raised, that why can't Takatso put 3 billion rands upfront for the assets that will be taking control of at SAA. Why must we be paid through this, preference share scheme? And for me, it raised flags to say, I mean, the question that I had asked regarding the capacity of Takatso, whether they have the financial strength to actually do the deal, and therefore the absence of our due diligence on them. I was asking those questions to say, and with this, when I saw this, I said, this confirms it. You will only come up with such a scheme if you do not have the money. Even the 3 billion rands that it was said that it will be put in as working capital into SA. I was asking the question, is it coming in as equity, is it coming in as debt? Is it shareholders' debt? Is it going to be raised against the balance sheet of SAA? Because obviously Takatso doesn't have a balance sheet. Those are the questions that I asked, and it will be helpful for the minister and the colleagues who are remaining in the department to help South Africans there, on this working capital that they said will be provided by Takatso. Where is it?
We are out of time, but what comes to your mind? Are you encouraged by the words of the incoming chairperson of the interim board when he says, paraphrasing, but I think he said something to the effect of there's clearly some irregularity in the valuing of these particular assets, and therefore they are agreeing that a process of re-evaluating the value of this asset should be undertaken?
Well, those are good words, and I hope you live up to them, Mr. Mkhuli. But let me just say that, Mr. Hanekom and Mr. Gordhan come a long way. They actually stay in the same block of flats in Cape Town. And I got privy to this. Obviously, one time I was flying back with Mr. Hanekom and Mrs. Hanekom, and they shared with me, the close relationship that they have with Mr. Gordhan. I hope we'll suspend that friendship, to ensure that he's independent and he acts at all times in the interests of SA.
Mr. Tlhakudi, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on tonight and sharing, of course, your side to this story. That's the suspended Public Enterprises Director General, Kgathatso Tlhakudi. Let me remind you again, we did reach out to the Department of Public Enterprises, and they have promised to come back to us, and we believe they will, and they'll send somebody to come, of course, to take their right to reply to this conversation.